Spend 100 pounds on a vacuum cleaner, and we will fly you and a friend to America. 2 round-trip tickets, worth about 600 pounds. Free. Would you say no? In 1992, a very real, very famous company put exactly that deal in front of the British public. And people did the math in about 4 seconds. Buy the cheapest thing in the shop, pocket 600 pounds of free flights. There was just one tiny problem. On that cheapest vacuum, the company made about 30 pounds. The flights it gave away cost around 600. One sentence in one advert, and it very nearly ended a company that had been going for 84 years. This is the story of the greatest deal a shopper ever got, and the worst one a company ever offered. A promotion so generous, so irresistible, that it worked far, far too well. How giants rise, and how one clever idea can bring the whole thing down. So let me introduce you to the company that made this offer. Hoover. Yes, that Hoover. The vacuum brand so famous that in Britain, people stopped saying, "I am vacuuming," and started saying, "I am hoovering." It began back in 1908 in a small Ohio town, and it spent decades as royalty of the cleaning aisle. By 1992, it was 84 years old, owned by the American giant Maytag, with a British arm sitting on warehouses full of appliances it badly needed to sell. A recession had shoppers holding tight to their money, so Hoover UK went looking for one big, splashy idea to get the tills ringing again. And oh, did they find one. Here was the plan. Spend 100 pounds or more on any Hoover product, and you would get 2 free flights. It sounds generous. It sounds like a bit of fun. A new washing machine and a holiday, all in one trip to the shop. But sit in that meeting room with me for a second and run the numbers. A qualifying vacuum cost about 119 pounds. Hoover's profit on it was roughly 30 pounds. And the 2 flights they were giving away were worth around 600. So for every customer who took the deal, Hoover handed over 600 pounds of travel to earn 30. Nobody, it seems, tested the one question that mattered. What if everyone simply bought the cheapest thing on the shelf? And that is exactly what everyone did. Word spread across Britain like wildfire. Forget the vacuum. This was basically buy a 100-pound appliance, get 600 pounds of free flights. People bought Hoover products they did not want, did not need, and in some cases never even took out of the box. Then, in November 1992, Hoover poured petrol on the fire. They extended the offer to transatlantic flights. New York, Orlando. Now a single 100-pound purchase could fly you to Florida. Demand did not rise. It went vertical. Over 200,000 people bought Hoover products just to get in on the promo. The tills were ringing all right. The factories reportedly ran flat out. Not because Britain suddenly loved vacuuming, but because everyone wanted the flights bolted on top. So how badly did Hoover misjudge this? When they planned the whole thing, they expected somewhere around 50,000 people to claim the flights. A big number, but manageable. Instead, the applications kept arriving, and arriving. Around 300,000 of them. That is roughly 6 times what the company had braced for. Picture planning a dinner for 50 guests, and 300 turn up on your doorstep, all holding a voucher, all expecting to fly to America. Hoover had promised something it had no real way to deliver. Because here is the thing about airline seats. You cannot conjure hundreds of thousands of them out of thin air. Hoover had partnered with a small travel firm to handle the flights, and that firm was nowhere near big enough to seat a stadium full of vacuum buyers. So the flights that had sounded so simple turned into a maze. Customers were sent long forms, offered awkward midweek dates nobody wanted. Told the New York flight was full, would they perhaps consider somewhere else on a day that suited no one? Some people had spent hundreds of pounds, waited months, and got nothing that looked like the holiday they were promised. What began as a cheerful little advert was quietly turning into a very public mess. And Britain, it turns out, does not shrug this sort of thing off. Angry customers started ringing the newspapers. The BBC consumer show Watchdog picked it up and put Hoover on the spot in front of the whole country. Then came the line that summed up the entire affair. One customer, a horse trainer named Dave Dixon, had spent hundreds of pounds to qualify. When his flights never appeared, a Hoover repairman reportedly told him that if he thought buying an appliance would get him 2 tickets to America, he must be a bit of a fool. Except it had. On paper, that was the exact deal. Dave Dixon was not laughing. And Dave Dixon was about to become a legend. And here is where this story goes gloriously off the rails. When a Hoover van pulled up on his street to make a delivery, Dave Dixon saw his moment. He parked a horsebox filled with manure right behind it, boxing the van into his own driveway. And there it stayed. Not for an hour, not for a day, for 13 days. The story ran in newspapers around the globe. A furious customer, a trapped Hoover van, and a horsebox holding it in place. In the end, it reportedly took a high court order to set the van free. If you wanted one perfect picture of how far this had unraveled, that was it, parked in a driveway in Workington. But Dave Dixon was not alone, not even close. Furious customers began organizing. They formed the Hoover Holidays Pressure Group, and it grew to more than 4,000 members, every one of them still chasing the flights they had been promised. And they came up with something brilliant. If Hoover would not listen, they would go straight to the top. The American parent Maytag sat on the other side of the ocean. So members of the group bought Maytag shares, flew to Iowa, walked into the annual shareholder meeting, and put their questions to the chief executive face to face. A promotion meant to shift a few vacuum cleaners had turned ordinary British shoppers into transatlantic campaigners. By now, Maytag had seen enough. On the 31st of March 1993, just 7 months after that cheerful advert first ran, the company let go of 3 senior Hoover executives over the affair. And the bill? By the time those firings happened, Hoover had already poured more than 20 million pounds into trying to honor the offer. And it kept climbing. And climbing. The widely cited total cost of this one promotion reached around 50 million pounds. For that year, Hoover Europe reported a loss of 23.6 million pounds on 390 million in sales. All of it traced back to one sentence about free flights. Hoover UK never really recovered. The brand that had been a household name for decades was now a punchline, the company that gave away Florida with a vacuum cleaner. In 1995, Maytag gave up and sold its entire European Hoover business to an Italian rival at a steep loss. An 84-year-old name handed off, all because of a promotion that ran for a few short months. Years later, a BBC documentary dug the whole thing back up, and the renewed attention reportedly cost Hoover its royal seal of approval too. And yet, here is the twist. That advert everyone regretted became one of the most famous marketing lessons ever taught. To this day, Business students open their textbooks and find Hoover right there under the heading, "Be careful what you promise." So what is the lesson hiding in all of this? It is almost too simple. Before you dazzle everyone with an offer, do the one boring thing first. Run the numbers and ask what happens if it actually works. Hoover dreamed up a deal so good that shoppers could not resist it. And that was precisely the problem. It worked far, far too well. A vacuum company promised the sky and very nearly gave itself away doing it. So here's a question for you. What is the wildest deal you have ever seen a company offer? Tell us in the comments. And which company should we open up next? Subscribe, because here we open the tapes the giants would rather keep closed. This was the Industry Tapes.